So, from our perspective, a conscious leader considers the whole person in their leadership style. So by this, I mean all facets, both personally and professionally. And COVID-19 has meant that these facets of ourselves are continuously and often very visibly overlapping, intertwining, butting heads, and needing to be managed. And this is life now. So, at the same time, our staff and ourselves as leaders are working harder than ever, adapting with lower capacity and resources, trying to constantly innovate and be creative, leapfrogging digitization, and basically having to do more faster and with much less in many cases. So, businesses and leaders have to account for the shift in their models, in their capacity planning and in their processes, in order to maintain an engaged workforce and a supportive company culture. So with the theme of conscious leadership in mind, the 4 webinar topics for this series, which I'll go into, at the end of this one, were conceptualized based on feedback from our clients, based on feedback from many of you in terms of specific challenges that they are dealing with. And most of us, I certainly can definitely relate to today's topic. So that is what box? Decision-making in the dark, what conscious leaders do when the box goes out the window. So Anne-Marie will elaborate more on that. So before we start, I'd just quickly like to go through the order of proceedings. So please keep your video on if possible. It's always nice to see faces and engage with faces. And please keep your video on when you'd like to ask a question. But while the webinar is underway and our guests are in their discussion, please keep your mic off. There will be a time at the end of the session for questions, but please do type your questions in the chat box as we go through the webinar, because I will interrupt our guests and I will ask your questions that are coming through in themes. So please keep those questions coming through. So I am honored and very, very, very excited to hand over to Anne-marie le Roux, who will be steering the conversation today. She is joined by other visionaries, Dr. Marlene le Roux, Melvi Todd, and Nangula Kauluma, who incidentally is also joining us from Windhoek. Apart from all of them being alums of the USB, you would have had an opportunity, I hope, to read a bit more about them in the slides, and no doubt what they do and what they have done will come out in the conversation. So that's from me for now. Over to you, Anne-Marie.
Thank you, Kerry. Good morning, everybody. I don't know if I need to say bonjour or dumela or I don't know which language to reference this morning, but from all over Africa, welcome, everybody. What a wonderful opportunity to actually share a virtual room this morning and to spend some time together, thinking, maybe talking, maybe learning from each other. And for that purpose, I've got wonderful guests that are going to share some of their stories, and hopefully you want to join in. So as Kerry mentioned, our topic of conversation this morning is around decision-making. Now, decision-making for me is all about choices and trade-offs, and decision-making happens in many cases unconsciously. So for me, the big reason why this is such a relevant topic today is the fact that we have established practices, and a lot of that is we are not even aware of. Now, when things change in our environment, as it has in the last year, indelibly and out of our control, completely out of our control, we are almost faced as leaders with our own tyranny of unconscious incompetence, if I can call it that. We are made aware of those things that are not relevant anymore. We are forced to change. We think about change a lot. And I think as most of our guests in the room and our participants today are studious people and learned individuals, we study change. We hypothesize about change. And it's almost like that beautiful car that we covet, but we never get into. Now, what happens if that change is done onto us? Violently, indescribably, and almost out of our control. For me, the big thing that happens is that our customers, our end users, our clients are indelibly changed because of that. And when our end user changes, we are forced to rethink our strategies. We are forced to rethink our operating models, our business models, our forecasted financial models, and probably most bewilderingly, if there is such a name, a word, and most authentically, our own mental models. So for me today, it is about really listening to people that are representing commerce, culture, entrepreneurship, education, all of it. We really try to get a diverse perspective in the room for all of you, to listen to stories and maybe to challenge our own perspectives and to become a little bit more intentional about these decisions that we make when we are forced to change. Are we still innovative, or are we just fixing ourselves into a future? So for that reason, my three wonderful guests that is joining me for this conversation, and I'm seeing all of you all across Africa as part of our conversation. So please feel free at any point in time to jump in, to ask questions, to raise comments. We've got USB Ed's wonderful marketing team manning all matters of and channels of communication, so they will interrupt us as and when needs be. So if I can maybe turn my gaze to the beautiful women that you see on your screen, Melvi, Nangula, Marlene, gorgeously outfitted today for this wondrous occasion. I'm curious, and I want to maybe start the conversation off by asking you all about where you are currently at. How are you doing at the moment? But let me first start off by saying, what events or persons can you think of that was instrumental in landing you in your current roles, in your current positions? Because to be in a position where other people think that your perspectives are important is quite a role to fill. It's quite a leadership role. So can you maybe think of any events or any specific people you want to maybe share a story on that brought you here in your current roles today? I don't know who wants to go for it. Maybe start off. Melvi, you are doing this, so maybe I'm pausing you. Oh, hospital pause here.
It's great. Morning, everyone. Yeah, so I think I should start off by saying that when I was growing up, I had this dream of starting my own business. And as you'll see, I am now, in fact, an entrepreneur with all that comes with that title. I grew up in a household where my dad had a small business running from home. He took me to school. He did homework with me, watched my hockey games. And I think for me, in my mind, that painted a picture of kind of like this balanced life of being able to work and pay attention to your family at the same time. But, you know, studies happen, study debt happens, and you need to pay off loans and things like that. And I found myself in this, you know, climbing the corporate ladder, going for the next job that paid more, that had a bigger title. And then about 2-3 years ago, I started waking up in the mornings, finding myself just without energy. And for most people that know me, they'll know that I'm full of energy. So when my energy levels are down, I need to ask myself, but what's happening here? And I just find myself in a space where I was like, but what am I doing? Where am I going? You know, am I really making a difference in the world with what I'm doing every day? And that was kind of for me a turning point to say, but, you know, how can I change things? How can I get my energy back? And the start of that was making this decision to start my own business. And I must say, it wasn't without support. I have a fantastic, supportive husband. You know, we made lots of changes, downscaled, all sorts of things. But in a nutshell, that's really what brought me to where I am today.
Thank you for that. I think to me it is courage, because to jump in that way, I wonder if we are a little bit more, you know, if we are stepping up the ladder in terms of age, if that is still something that is easy, or if it's you just jumped at the right moment, maybe at the right time. Nangula, you are Businesswoman of the Year, Namibia. Wow. Anything that jumps to mind?
Morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, Anne-Marie, I was sitting here thinking, my mind has gone so many places now. Like Melvi, I feel, if I hear her right, my upbringing shaped a lot of how I've approached my career, My dad was a bishop of the Anglican Church for a really long time. My mom was a lifelong vocation, old school teacher. And we had an upbringing that was all about service, humility, but purpose, and really believing in what you stand for. To never make apologies for who you are. And so I think I was raised with a very strong sense of self-confidence, but also a very deep sense of duty. I've never worked in the same economic sector more than once. And so people look at my CV reads crazy. Like, what is this person thinking? Why have they moved so many different places?
Confused individual.
She can't make up her mind. But what it is it's actually been sort of a progression, and working in each industry sort of has allowed me to bring almost a cross-pollination, and probably accelerated my ability to grow in whatever role I'm in. So I've been in executive positions since relatively young, and I don't want to name individuals because there are so many who shaped me, sometimes actually all for the better, whether their intentions were and impact were right or not. But there's so many teachers, but maybe I'll just name the person who hired me into financial services in the first place. At the time, he was the CEO of Old Mutual Namibia, went on to run their rest of Africa operations, where I eventually moved into. And so Johannes Gavachab was, he's currently the governor of the Namibia, the Bank of Namibia. He was a phenomenal teacher, I guess that typical sponsor mentor. And he really just saw, I think he recognized the unconscious competence and was able to sort of say, no, you've got this. Yes, you're capable of doing this. Stretched me incredibly hard and far, but also just so much compassion and empathy. And then my most recent boss, who hired me into this role that I'm in now, almost no banking experience, but deep leadership capabilities. And he really backed me on the basis of that. So he didn't know me from a bar of soap. He'd been in his role for 2 or 3 months. And a year and a half later, it's going really well.
Wow. You know what resonates with me? You started off by talking about purpose when you spoke about a sense of duty and all of that. And I think for me, that confusion that you talk about in terms of climbing the ladder is so much easier if you have your North Star sorted, if you have that guiding light sorted. So it shines from you. So it's so nice to hear your story. Marlene, I'm leaving beauty for last. Look at this woman, beautifully
all for you.
representing culture for us. Gorgeous. Is there any story that jumps to mind if we talk about what brought you here?
I think the most important story for me is that I come from very harsh background. And my granny was a domestic worker. My mother, a single parent coming from 11 children, actually, grape pickers, farmers. So I have no choice to where I am. I must make a change, and I must open the doors for other people, because sometimes it was luck, and I'm a woman with a disability. So I always say I'm a survivor of apartheid. I walk with polio. I've got post-polio, but I never let my past determine my destiny. But my past needs to make me kind, so that no one must be invisible, because I grew up to be invisible and my people being invisible. So I take this with me on my path, so that it shaped me a lot, and it shaped me. I'm a people's person. So I laugh a lot. And where I am today, a lot of people played a role in my life. The smallest of the small, where people think perhaps they're not important, but they were so important in my life. Just to include me in their parties. And that was for me important to make who I am.
Wow, it's so inspirational to hear that. And maybe it ties nicely into our topic, Marlene, of today, which is about when everything changes around us. We are sometimes in control of that change, but probably most recently, definitely not. In fact, it has been done onto us. And that sometimes breeds the highest form of personal achievement and innovation, and almost makes you aspire, if you can deal with that change, if you can absorb it, and it sounds like you absorbed a lot of uncontrollable events which were kind of like outside of your sphere of influence, and you made it work for you, which is exceptionally inspirational. So, yeah.
I think, Anne-marie, what is so important with conscious leadership is that you need to take people along with you. You need to leave your ego behind. And you can't all the time have this feeling sorry for yourself, but you also need to lead with conviction. You also need to lead purposefully, because it's not everything that just landed into your lap. And I want to say to people on this, I'm very honored to be with these visionary women on this panel, because I learn from them, is that every single day you learn from somebody else and you open yourself actually to learn. For me, the cleaning lady in the team is just as important as the director, because the cleaning lady sometimes subconsciously see everything that is happening in the company. And then that cleaning lady will tell you, this is not happening right in that department because somebody has a problem with a child or is going through a divorce, because she's bringing the tea and she hears the telephone conversation. So the way I look at things is sometimes very unconventional, because I will have interaction with a staff that you're perhaps not supposed to have interaction with. I don't believe in hierarchical leadership, Anne-marie.
Beautiful. Love that. We always giggle, and sometimes I wonder who's actually running the companies and the organizations. So I want to pivot a little bit and ask you, what is currently keeping you awake at night? What are those things that you know when you wake up in the morning and you have a sense of, oh my goodness, it wasn't a good night? And I think it's important to acknowledge in this room, where we have all these beautiful participants across Africa, that things are not always, it's not like we wake up singing Kumbaya every morning. There's really some tough things we need to face as leaders. We are exposed in many ways, and we are the ones that are forced to make choices and trade-offs, even when it feels like we are stuck between a rock and a hard place. So are there anything specifically that comes to mind in terms of keeping you awake? Whoever wants to jump in, you're most welcome.
I'll maybe start. So I think for me, two things. When I started this journey, obviously I also involved a lot of my friends, some of whom are also entrepreneurs. And one of my friends said, you must just be aware when you go on this journey, it's a matter of feast or famine. And that has absolutely been my experience. There's not a standard paycheck waiting for you at the end of every month. There's maybe or maybe not a 13th check. So that makes it sometimes pretty tough, planning your life, planning, your expenses, all these things that you need, all your commitments every month. So, you have the good months. And I think that's really taught me to manage and, be a little bit like a squirrel. So when the money comes in, you put it away, you hope that you'll be able to use it, or worst case scenario, it's going to be there waiting for you, when winter comes. So I think that's a really important aspect. And then I think for me, the other thing is that it's me, myself, and I, in terms of my reputation. I need to walk into a company confidently with my skills, my background, and be able to tell the executives that I'm working with that I am going to help you working with this challenge that you have. And I sometimes, I doubt myself. And just to add to that self-doubt, I'm doing a PhD. So, the imposter syndrome is real in my life. So I think those for me are two real challenges. It's tough when you're still in the space of, making your name, making your reputation. You're still in the process of, racking up the projects behind your name that went successfully, collecting those references. So, each project you walk into it thinking like, I hope I'm going to walk out the other side having made a good impression. And yeah, it's scary as hell. So yeah.
I can absolutely relate. And I think the latest research are also supporting your way of work, Melvi, in the sense that at some point, I think the studies are showing us that by 2024, 2025, most of us will be working on contract in any case. So even if you are so-called permanently enrolled in a specific career opportunity or in a specific context, you are going to be as good as your last job. And to some extent, that is healthy. Not very good for the nerves, though. So I understand completely. Anything else that makes you stay up, dear friends, that are keeping you awake and making you think, oh my goodness, am I big enough for this chair? Nangula.
So sure, I'm fiercely protective of my sleep, Anne-marie. So it doesn't necessarily. And I'm not ashamed to admit, it's not often that I struggle to sleep. People envy how quickly I fall asleep and how well and consistently I sleep. But it just, I have to, because this brain is just so busy all day. So when I'm awake, there are many things. I'm one of those, what's the label? High performing, anxious people. So I will worry about everything until there's a plan, till there's a solution. And then when there's nothing to worry about, I will worry about why there's nothing to worry about. So just to put that out there, so I'm sleeping very well, actually. My sleep app said I slept 83% quality last night. But what is keeping me awake in my waking hours is really around, I think it's on two fronts. The one is how to really facilitate through my team, or facilitate growth with the set of leaders that are in my team. I really care deeply. And you know, it's linked to my purpose and so forth. So we've gone through probably the most traumatic year that everyone has gone through, and it's the gears that we've been driving in now almost need to shift, because we've got to learn to be able to now run the marathon or the extreme endurance event that lies ahead, accepting that there's so much uncertainty. So there's an element around, how do I show up for them? How do I make sure that they're okay? At the same time, how do I make sure they're doing what they need to be doing and not wheel spinning in the, generally they're in a good space. So I care about really investing in them. And we, maybe just as context, look after the biggest part of this business. So FNB, as part of the First Rand Group, is the largest bank in Namibia, and our business unit is the biggest component of it. So we all have this very deep sense of responsibility. But then flip to the other side is, I think I've been a really awful mom for the last year and a half. I thought I felt guilt about being a single working mom, but hey, kids are expensive. So I have been chasing that corporate track.
What? Are you saying you are not having all the balls in the air at the same time?
Never, ever. But so at the same, so it's really, it's this awareness that I've not been very present for the last year and a half. My one kid is already out the house and the other one is about to be, and I only have this much time left. So it's about really juggling, not dropping the crystal balls and being okay with dropping rubber balls. So I'm trying to worry about the crystal balls, if that makes sense, because they shatter. You can't actually ever glue them back together again. But the rubber balls, yeah, not great. It's not, you look clumsy or, you know, but actually they'll bounce back. You'll catch them. Yeah.
Beautifully said. I think it comes back to those choices and trade-offs. If you don't spend time really raising your awareness around what really matters and what is just hamster stuff, you know, what's just busyness, fixing things that might not even be relevant tomorrow, but really making choices that create that sustainability, and that, as you mentioned, in the relationships, especially at work and at home, I think are some of those things that is a very important point to raise in this conversation today, that no matter how dark that decision making and how deep the box we feel we are in, that there is a sense of, if we really invest in the relationships, we will be okay, because we can sort it together. So I really love it really makes sense what you're saying. Thank you for that. Marlene, are you a sleeper or are you hibernating? What's going on?
No, I don't sleep actually. I've learned it from my son. I had a cerebral palsy son, I needed to, when I was on the height of my career, needed to have two nurses, and you need to juggle. So it is about, for this particular COVID-19 2020, I was in two industries. The one, the arts, that was hit by the knees, totally destroyed, and I'm a disability activist. So it was also, I was more fearful about myself because I'm an activist at heart. And for me, it was, how do I retain everybody's job? And how do I lobby? Because I needed to see myself. I can't now be like sitting on and say, I don't have an answer. I needed to have an answer because it's lives of people that's been affected. And on the other hand, being also too strong and being too much of an activist, that can also sway people away from me. So I needed to work on so many levels, even with myself, to say, okay, don't push that one too hard, because at the end that will be a detrimental to the employees. Be nice even if you don't like it now. Keep just be nice so that we can just, so at some points, I couldn't sleep because I thought, oh my God, I need to go drink tea with this person that doesn't share the same ethics at this particular point with me. But I needed to swallow it because there's a bigger picture. I need to get food for my disabled people. I needed to get them on the agenda of the president. On the other hand, it was the artists I needed to write for, so that the arts can also be a priority and the theatre going ahead. So it was a lot of things that need. In the end, I must say my health suffered. So what I want to put on this particular platform is that everything at some point for myself with my health has gone all zero wrong. On the other side, things with the lobbying went ahead. So, what I want to put out, because we're in a conversation, sometimes my biggest fear is, Anne-marie, I never put myself first. And what I've realized is that with my health, if I don't put myself also first, and I'm single, I've got no one that's going to look after me, I'm actually not being going to be of worth for somebody else to use my opportunities and what I can be for other people. So I just want to put also my vulnerability.
Such a beautiful point to make. And I think sometimes we forget, because to have a strong purpose means to be of service. Purpose is always a service. And what you are saying, Marlene, and almost connecting it to Nangula and to Melvi's points, is that if this vessel is empty, how can you give? And to give yourself permission as a leader, especially in times of change, to make those decisions that you know also looks after yourself. So I think a beautiful point to raise. Maybe I'm still in the current space, because we are still not over this pandemic, and I think the change is probably going to ripple through our systems and our sectors for a long time to come. I want to know, where are your customers? Where are your end users? Where are your clients? Because if they change, then, my friends, we need to change. If they are not the same that they were, a year or 2 years ago, then where does that leave us? Because we are now using our old patterns of the past to make decisions about the future. We don't know it. We think we are moving with change, but in many, many cases, we are so stuck in our ways of intuiting, how we behave in the future. We use our data of the past. We use our, all our trends and patterns and forecasts, and they have kind of like become a little bit irrelevant. So where does that leave your market or your reason for being? Because it's your customers that actually are the ones that you create value for. Where are they at? And specifically in your context, what's happening in that space?
Anne-marie, if I can just quickly start, is that I think for us it was, we were gone. I just allowed us to be sorry for ourselves for 3 weeks because I didn't sleep. Because you now
I
then
thought you were going to say for 2 minutes. I'm so glad it was 3 weeks. Thank you, Marlene.
because you needed to switch, to make a switch.
Yeah.
And that switch was because the pandemic is also a mental health issue. I want to put it here. It makes you depressed. You're scared of the future, and you need to take your team with you. And immediately we thought about what is the tools that young people work with. So the intergenerational gap came in, and we then realized we were the busiest ever in 2020. We will become known like never before because we become streamed. We became on YouTube channels. We just changed our audience totally, turning it around. But you needed to take away from yourself from how you've done it traditionally.
Beautiful. Wise words. I think you opened up channels that if you were not forced to, you probably wouldn't have gone there. So, wow, good to know. Nangula, Melvi, where's your customer base at? I mean, we're talking commerce here, Nangula.
Yeah, so I'll probably speak a little bit more to the retail customer in Namibia, but I mean, it's a and Melvi as an entrepreneur and a business owner might add additional flavor to that. But the Namibian economy was under significant strain for a number of years prior to pandemic. So from a starting point, it wasn't like the typical man in the street had enough of a buffer. They've already been holding on for quite a while. Namibia has quite high levels of debt to income. And so it's just been, I think when lockdown first hit us, the frontline workers are health workers. But next in line were financial services, particularly the banks, because transactional activity still has to happen. People need to access their savings. They need to restructure where they've got facilities. And it has been quite a learning experience. I think very practically, a lot of our customers we've seen them opting to use digital channels and self-service as much as possible, not come into the branch anymore. And we even did things like put the first hour that we opened, or the first couple of hours we opened in a branch, were only for senior citizens because they're a vulnerable part of the population. But it's just been, so for us, it's the one other thing is that customers, and this is a lot of the conversation we have, is the expectation that customers have of us has just gone so many more levels up because of this heightened anxiety, all of this uncertainty. People are fearful. We know that a human individual tends to have quite a complex relationship with the idea of the bank. So the expectations of us and the requirements of us have just leapfrogged, and we're trying to just keep the ship together, but then also leapfrog how we are servicing and meeting the needs of our customers.
Makes absolute sense. And what you are saying, Mike, to me also resonates. I think in many cases, especially where we saw businesses that closed down during the first 3 months of the pandemic, and I may be referencing Southern Africa in this context, already had cracks showing. There was already a sense of the trajectory isn't good. So it's not like the pandemic really brought the trouble. It's like the pandemic heightened or distilled those risks and concerns and those cracks, and in some cases even partnerships and marriages and relationships and all of that too. So I think what you are saying makes absolute sense. I want to check in with you, Nangula. Was your strategy robust enough to almost flex for catering to the expectations of the customer, or did you have to make a U-turn?
No, so it's just been amazing because this is a very large organization that I work for, and sometimes when you are sort of the contrarian or the out-of-the-box thinker by nature, large organizations and all their processes and structures and why we need to do things the way we do actually came to absolute almost manifestation in this time. In fact, a lot of our strategies did not need to pivot, not U-turn. They might have just needed to course correct, and they definitely had to be accelerated. So we accelerated internally, but then also the market demands from our customers were pushing us to accelerate. So if anything, the big components of our strategy have proved to be absolutely on point and have set us up really well to, it's just an exponential sort of acceleration. What we thought we would see a few years down the line, we've actually realized and seen in this past year.
That's fantastic. That is really fantastic because it says something in terms of your forward planning around the near future. So good show. Melvi, you have the privilege to probably work across many segments and many industries and many sectors. What are you seeing around the customer or the end user? What changed?
Definitely. And I think, a lot of my primary work is in the FMCG space, both food and personal care. And I think I just also want to take a moment to say that, what I see is they're feeling tired. We talked a lot about frontline workers, healthcare, and they're doing an amazing job. But you know what? The FMCG industries made sure that we still have food to eat and toilet paper. And, apart from the first week of the pandemic where everybody went crazy and bought off the shelves clean, that was it felt like the last that people really thought about what the FMCG roles played in this whole thing. So, for me, it's really just a shout out as well to say thank you to a lot of them for keeping us fed and keeping our personal needs attended to. But apart from that, I think, what we're seeing as it's a mix of things. Obviously, we have technology developing at a rate of knots, and a big, emergence of the development or use of AI in FMCG. Specifically, even if you think about food and so on, I mean, last year they developed a milk from an amazing mix of products, nuts and pineapple and cabbage and carrots and all sorts of crazy things. And they used the algorithm to make this milk from things that are definitely not, cow's milk. And so the question is, and my background is also in R&D, is like, where does that leave us? If our traditional ways of doing things have been based on, animals and, R&D scientists and, supply chains, how does that change things? Because we might even be able to create things on the spot. So I think a big point of concern within, let's call it the FMCG space, is this impact of technology. And it's not a question of if it's going to happen, it's a question of when it's going to happen. And I think the question that a lot of my clients are asking is like, how do we prepare for that? How do we make sure that, when it happens, that we're not again at the receiving impact end of this massive impact like we've had with COVID, but we're ready to take advantage of all the benefits that it brings to the table. So I think, and I think the other thing I also just want to say is what I see is, a discussion we a lot of the time have. I'm often approached for, let's call it business improvement, cost saving type projects. And, the thing I always say as well is you're not going to save yourself into a profit. You're going to have some cost savings, but at the end of the day, cost savings to put a product on the shelf for cheaper is this really bad downward spiral. You need to still be investing in innovation. And that's a really tough one, especially when money is tight, and let's face it, R&D it's a longer term investment, sometimes takes 2-3 years before you actually see something from your money, and it's not always successful. A lot of products fail, so I think those are some things that are really top of mind in a lot of the customers that I work with.
It makes sense to me, and maybe what some of our friends have discussed also previously is that it's not a good time to innovate when you are really, really down. Your normal curve is almost at the tail end and you are forced to jump. However, many of the biggest innovations we see in the world was actually not because we wanted to, but because we had to. So there's this whole human part that's struggling to accept, the industries that are ripe for disruption. And we know it, we talk about it, we intellectualize it, but we don't really pull it in. We don't own it. And then something happens that almost triggers us. And we realize when we jump, why didn't we do this before? Why was this a choice that we had to make when it could have been a choice we wanted to make before? So for me, that is also part of today, is to think about those things that we know it's coming. It's discussions. It's stuff that is all around us, but we think not now. My question is, when then? When it's too late, when you don't have the capital, when you don't have the luxury of energy or spare capacity that gives you that sense to jump. So Melvi, I think you're spot on. I want to we spoke a lot about the current state and where we are in, and maybe if we jump a little bit to the future, or at least the near future, because as we all know, most of our plans went down the drain with the toilet paper that was in short supply initially. So if we think about our near future, is there maybe some thoughts from you around what this new future world of work is going to look like? What would you like to see? What are you aiming for? What is your ideal future, your ideal state? And yeah, I'm specifically thinking about, how our places of work, is imagined or reimagined by you. How our employees are working, is it the old office space, or is it something that is a little bit of a hybrid? Is it a little bit of newness that we haven't even fully, captured yet? What is, and even personally, this new world of work, what does it mean for you as leaders and your leadership style? What are you seeing evolving and maybe happening in the near future? And specifically, not maybe Melvi, and to all of your points previously, as a result of fixing and being forced to, but almost leapfrogging to that ideal state. Can you maybe share some of your thoughts or some of your reflections on this? Because I want us to be encouraging and helpful to our participants out there to maybe share some of their thinking also around this near future, this ideal state that we're all building.
Anne-marie, it's Kerry here. Can I sort of wedge in here? Because I've got a question that sort of links to current state and future state. And it's really about, speaking to Nangula's comment about the expectations of the client, and Marlene's comments about, personal health taking a toll. As we look to the future, we've basically come, and this is, I speak to many of my friends who are, business managers and leaders, and we all seem to be, losing sleep over what did we forget to do? When is this ball going to drop? And that speaks to how do we prioritize really? Because we're faced on one side with the expectations of our clients that are nonstop, because their needs are evolving constantly, and similarly the priorities of the business. And my own team members on this call will laugh at me because I'm constantly talking about priorities. But what are they? And how can we go about actually taking a step back, taking stock for our own mental health, and in order to actually survive this? Because when we came into a year ago now, March 2020, we came in and we did what needed to be done, and now we have less and we are doing more. And how long can we keep going? So
especially, I think in the context of not fixing a future, not taking the current state and forecasting that, but rather creating an ideal state. What is it that we want, rather than
exactly how to prioritize what needs to be done. I would really like some sort of pointers and help in terms of how to go about doing that based on people's experience.
Absolute sense. Thank you for that. Maybe who wants to jump in? Nangula, what are your thoughts on the points raised?
So the point around prioritization is actually really topical to me, almost from a personally for me as a leader at the moment. And literally in this week, I've made a list of things I can control, things that are out of my control. And as I have triggers, I'm sense checking for myself. what's going on here, and it's going in that list, no judgment, nothing. And my intention is once the list feels full enough, then I'm going to go, okay, what are the things that actually matter in my control? In terms of the ones that are not in my control, what do I need to influence? And to Marlene's earlier point about you have to drink tea with people sometimes that you really don't want to drink tea with, I'm going to actually embrace drinking tea with them. And then, in fact, this week I pulled out Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, the Matrix of urgency versus importance. And it seems like, duh, it's not rocket science. But actually, I have this conversation with my team a lot. If you really need capacity for us to meet all of these things, or if you need robots to make this happen, or if we need to prioritize data scientists, quants, and analysts, and those kinds of skills to enable you or to speed things up, no problem. We can resource you. But I want to sense check, are these things really important? And what is the measure of how important they are? A lot of the time, currently, I think because of where we've been at in the last year or so, is everything was urgent. And we didn't know what was actually important or not, because we had no view of what's next and what's coming. And we still don't necessarily. We remain optimistic. The outlook has relief and a turning point eventually, but we don't really know. And we're now at the point where we're hyper forecasting. And yes, yesterday what was mission critical might not be so important today. So it's courage. I think it's courage, and it's about also having the discipline to create quiet moments to really reflect on what is a needle mover and what is actually, this thing we used to do long ago. It's not going to serve us going forward. Actually, can it? We're not going to continue with it. Otherwise, we continue to have the old normal, whatever that was, and this new normal, even workplaces. It's kind of hybrid in our world at the moment, but someone said the other day, it's like the nature of the work has fundamentally changed, but our physical space hasn't. So we need to get to almost replicating, because we're sometimes in office, sometimes work from home, that it can be almost fluid and seamless.
Well, I think you've already raised quite a few things that is helpful. The fact that you're a list maker, and I think we've got 3 fellow list makers in the room here, is a very good point. I think the fact that you are pulling out some of those models around the Eisenhower matrix and what's important and what's urgent is helpful, because we need to reflect on it. We need to raise our awareness around that. For me, the danger is about forecasting, because the patterns of the past took, it brought us here, but it's not going to take us there. So intuitively, leaders tend to grab onto science and analytics, and they want to look at what worked in the past and kind of like, especially because we zoomed in. When you are in crisis, you zoom in. It's fight or flight, when we should actually be zooming out, as you mentioned. So I think you raise quite a few practical points that could be helpful to our participants. Anything from your side, Melvi?
Maybe just some additional practical points that I find really help me, because I find myself split in 1,000 different directions, often between the different sort of portfolio career aspects that I'm working with. And for me, what works is I put everything in my diary. I put personal appointments in the diary. I put, when I'm going to go running in my diary. I'm going to put when I'm spending time with the family, and literally, like, it's, sometimes my friend's birthday is coming up. I'm like, when are you available? When I'm available. We need to do something for your birthday, but the reality is our diaries are full. So, it's sometimes planned 2 months in advance for birthdays. So it sounds crazy, but I just found it helped me manage the stress of feeling like I'm letting people down if I can't make it. So that for me is, and what I kind of touched on it now as well. But the other thing is just really, not everybody likes exercising and running and getting sweaty. Some people prefer swimming, meditation, whatever. But you need to take at least, I don't know, half an hour or whatever the prescribed time is, but some time in your day just to not be on your phone in front of your computer, and that me time, the reflection Nangula spoke about. That for me is something that I also really do, is reflecting on what I'm doing. Is it still mission aligned or isn't it? And for me also as an entrepreneur, every time, if I turn away a job, I'm turning away money, which, there might not be another project to replace it, but I have to be honest with myself and say, is this really mission aligned? Is this something I can do? So also that constantly checking and adjusting, the proverbial GPS recalculating. So between the scheduling and a little bit of off time and constantly checking in, that's kind of how I try and balance the balls.
You survive. I think when you get to a certain age, Melvi, which clearly you are not yet, you forget your diary and the notes you made or the post-it notes that you had in the diary for the diary to remind you of the diary. And that becomes quite an organization to sort out. But I think very important point is that diary. And I think you alluded to the fact that, is this still mission critical? Is this still aligned or congruent to that purpose, that what you, Nangula, referred to as that stuff that matters? Because sometimes the fluff get in the way, and sometimes the people that make the loudest noise and that jump up and down are not really the stuff when we zoom out and we look at the whole, we look at how everything hangs together. So your point, and that self-care that Marlene also referred to previously, Melvi, I think that we will not have an opinion if we don't take time to reflect, to actually get an informed opinion. And the fact that you are my friends and hosts and co-hosts of this conversation, it forces us to reflect. We have to reflect because it's in reflection that we grow. So that diary of yours has such multiple uses, Melvi. I think such helpful points to all of the participants out there. So thank you for that. Marlene, please share your wisdom on this.
I think most important for me, I'm very people-centered, and in a sense, for me, is not all of us have the opportunity. You can't be an absent leader. You can't be an absent person leading and speak in a vacuum. So it is very important for me to make a mental note of everybody's challenges that they have in the organization in order for me to tap in. But one tool that I've learned very well over my illustrious career, I can't
love that. Own it.
But what I've learned, I've never forget. I've got friends. I'm a middle-aged woman that I know for 50 years. And they're not in the same industry or in the same bracket that I'm, but they have wisdom. So it's like you need to balance. You can't have your friends from the workplace and party with them or what. No, it's unnecessary. It is unhealthy. Get real. My other thing also I want to say, hello, go volunteer. Go do something that brings you down from being the CEO or that person that is so important in your workplace. Go do the soup kitchen. Go be part where you are. If you're part of a church group or what, don't be the leader there. Then you just play a supportive role. That helps me in so many ways. It makes me relax. I can't say it will make other people relax, but I think it's important that when we look at the future, it's not going to be the same. We need to give of ourselves and also to take away from ourselves. But lastly, I want to say to us is that there's a generation which is young people, where we need to be mentors to them, where we need to say to them that, listen here, how are we going to create a new type of leadership? Say to them, this was the pitfalls from our side. How do we mentor them to be ethical leaders, make the right decisions, having balanced life, and not just think about their first paycheck to drive the Mercedes? I want to say it on this platform. Stop it. And I want to say it to us as Africans. Stop it. We haven't arrived. There are too many persons that doesn't have a job and that doesn't have food. So we need to be conscious of that. Thank you.
Beautiful. I love your passion. I think highlights for me in what you just said was that sense of being present, to be in the moment, because that makes people feel like they matter. I sometimes wonder about, attention deficit and all these things. And to me, the word says it all. It's almost as if we're there, but we're not present. And that creates a sense of, I don't feel you heard me. I don't think value that enough. And Marlene, as always, collaboration beyond your work. Your work isn't your whole life. It's part of it. And to have that diversity of wisdom and influence all over, be it to be of service or even to give service to industries or places that you're not necessarily the big chair, is such a healthy practice. I really, really appreciate those words. I think just to maybe put your skin on the table, dear friends. What about the future? What are we thinking? And I don't want you to predict anything, because obviously we're recording. So I might come back to you in 2 years to say that scenario didn't exactly pan out, because in most of the cases, I can tell you very few businesses I know actually were ready for this pandemic. So no scenarios that we modeled as very thoughtful academics actually served us truly to the extent that we wanted to. So any thoughts on the new world of work? Any thoughts on what we need to focus on as leaders with our employees? Any thoughts on the physical spaces we are creating or dreaming about? Any thoughts on your leadership style that will be required from us? We might not be there, but we're imagining it. We're thinking about it, because if we're thinking about that future, we are indelibly creating it. So anyone wants to jump in about this new world of work?
I think for me, again, I just want to go back to, actually, in thinking about this webinar, I went back to, before you do your MBA, you have to write some essays. And one of these essays is an essay that says, well, what are your career objectives? Where do you see yourself in 5 and 10 years? And I went and read my essay and it said, okay, I'm doing my MBA, but I'm probably going to have to recoup those finances. So I see myself back in industry for another 2 to 3 years. Then by 5 years, I kind of want to be running with my own thing. And then from the 5 to 10 year on, let's call it time frame, the idea is to grow my business, actually hire talented young people to work with me. And I think, but the reality is that, is that even where we're going? And we talked briefly just now about this idea of everything's going to be contract. And where I find myself in the space now is that, you can't do everything. You don't have all the resources. So what's worked really well is there's actually a fantastic entrepreneurial community. And, there's a few of us that collaborate. So when we work on projects, we each bring different skills to the table. So I think, as much as that's happening in the entrepreneurial space, it's definitely going to happen more and more in the formal work space. And you already see it. If you see on LinkedIn, you see the jobs advertised. A lot of them are coming through now as, contract positions. It's for a specific project. And I think it speaks to this idea of, in future, we're going to be managing even more for the outcomes that we wish to see, rather than the broken down, exact actions and this idea.
This is your job description. Yes. This is your career path. Exactly. You are married to me for life situation.
Yes. So I think it's going to really be about managing for those outcomes. And yeah, it takes a different kind of leadership. I think it requires an extreme amount of trust. And I think that is what we're battling with at the moment. We're seeing a lot of people talking about, why do we have to go back to work? We've been working online for the last year and our outputs have been as good as ever. Some businesses have made more money than in the past. They've saved money and all this sort of thing. So I think, for me, it's a future with more trust, and trust is going to be something which you need to also manage and ensure through doing everything that you do with integrity, keeping your word, delivering where needed, being honest when things aren't going the right way. So, because if you become known, even well, definitely in my space, but even in the let's call it formal workspace, as someone that can't be trusted and that's gonna play an even more important role than ever before, the way I see it. And I think the other thing is just hiring for the right attitudes, because I think we almost can't train people fast enough for the right type of skills for the jobs that we don't even know that are going to exist. Even myself, I see AI coming. I don't know how algorithms work, but it's on my to-do list to figure that out at some point in time. So
it's on the urgent list, not the important list.
Yes. So hiring for people who've got the right sort of learning attitude and to be able to engage in this environment.
That is such amazing thoughts, and I think in a way you are almost interrogating the soft part of the new world of work. You are interrogating the leadership and the trust issues, and I think for too long we haven't spoken enough about that. And I think if this series is going to raise one thing, it's really about embracing all parts of our employability, and also us as employers looking at those traits. So Melvi, I hear you. Nangula, what are your thoughts from a commercial point of view? What do you see? What is your ideal? If you could create that ideal world, what would it look like?
Sure, I almost want to say what she said and say ditto to Melvi. I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, can you leave a few points?
No.
So I feel that. I completely echo what Melvi has said. So when I sort of framed my mind, I think maybe just a couple of things. The one is that to the earlier point, that I think that the pace of change, the magnitude of change, is not necessarily going to slow down. And I really do think we're in a new reality that we're existing in. So we're going to just have to accept that. And as much as we don't like it, accept it. It is that way. But at the same time, I think we have great opportunities to shape the outcomes of where we find, or from where we are now. So definitely the stuff around critical thinking, agility, whole person leadership of self and of others become really, really key. I think that this time we find ourselves in has also made very clear for a lot of people how important connection and relationships are, and how unimportant material things. So don't get me wrong, I love things. I miss shopping terribly, but I realize I don't need to shop. I don't need to shop. I haven't been to Joburg since 2019.
You want to?
And
you don't need
to. So really about, just learning to roll with the punches. And the last thing is just this concept of, I don't know, it probably has the framework probably has a name, but aligning head, heart, and gut in decision making. And sometimes when you're stuck at a decision, it's important to just check in and say, okay, well, if we've got all the data, all the clever kids have actually given us all the data, the analysis, the insights, it's actionable, but something in my gut is off. What are we missing? Or similarly, gut is saying, let's do it. The data actually supports it, but the heart not quite in it. All right. And it's bringing diversity really to life in the room. So that the person who doesn't always speak in the room might actually be the one who can help completely change or shift the discussion to get to a place where head, heart, and gut are aligned. So about not being married to ideas and really being okay with rolling with it.
You're very, very wise words. I think that whole concept of becoming fit with IQ, EQ, and SQ, which never in the past mattered. So Nangula, it almost feels like it's becoming more complex, and we are needing a special kind of leadership. It's not becoming easier. It's not as if we can outsource parts anymore. We need to have a handle on more stuff, where in the past, if you manage the hard stuff and the hard numbers and the hard outcomes, that was okay. And now we know that the drivers of that is actually soft. So it's almost like expanding into a place where we're probably not training the right skills for the future. And I'm thinking of that maybe from my perspective also. So I love your view on it, because you are definitely from a value chain point of view, you are where it matters most in terms of creating value to our end users. And if we're not getting it right upstream, then obviously it's going to fail there. So thank you. Marlene, what does that Garden of Eden look like?
I must say, what I've learned is that people needs people. It's very important. What we've realized is that during this time, the effect that it had when people were isolated, it really, as human beings, we need to have that interaction with each other to actually get the best from each other. I think as leaders now in this, and I'm talking about us as an African continent, which is we are not in government, we need to look at how can we influence government in a positive way and use the skills of our sectors in order to unleash so that government's money can be directed very clearly, which can be implemented, and we can become a source of how to not just looking at problems, but looking at innovation, entrepreneurship. Because if you're an entrepreneur, you need capital, you need seed funding. So it's if you have rich parents, okay, you can do it. You have a house, a collateral.
Where are those parents, Marlene? We all
what I want to say to you is that, and Melvi, you understand, because you need to think all the time, where is my paycheck is going to come from, or a new entrepreneur. So I think we can't anymore just be in silos. We need to come together more, merge companies, see how we can assist government. And lastly, I want to say for the future is, as a leader, what comes out of your mouth, it's very important. If you spread negativity, you breed negativity. If you're going to be an advocate of taking ownership, together ownership, that's very important in how you're going to take your company to the next level. Then the ownership is not just on you as a leader. So for me, it's about collective ownership that's going to take us forward, and not just you as the only person in the company going to make that decision to take us forward. Thank you.
Sure. Marlene, I can't help it, but a certain ex-president jumps to mind. You know, if we think about leadership, I'm really earnestly looking across the world for examples, and I'm looking for people to study and for people to highlight and to emulate. And for me, it's always been, and you articulated it now spot on, you know, that look for people who unite, because in 2 minutes, you know, if this person is dividing a room or if they are uniting a room. So your whole, you know, sense of who are the collaborators, the co-creators and the co-partners of the world? Who are those ones who can really look at even competitors out there and not say, how do I beat you, you know, take you out of the game, but how can we work together to make it happen? Because that is maybe the biggest a wonderful thing that's coming out of this whole change intervention we've been through in the last year. So, my dear friends, I think our time is almost up, and I want to say, wow, I am amazed. It has really been, it felt like we just had a sip of coffee, and I thought we would have at least, Marlene, 2 cups of tea together. So I don't know, Kerry, if I can hand over to you for a few questions, maybe from our participants out there across the hills, the valleys, and the seasides of Africa, to maybe see if there's anything we can be helpful with, or maybe words of wisdom from my friends on our thought leadership conversation today.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Yes, so we had a question from Merle Bron. She's on the YouTube chat, so unfortunately can't ask the question herself. You know, and this was when we were talking about the future state. So the question was, how do businesses, sort of when I spoke about the prioritization, how do businesses support employees through all of this change?
Wow. Can I just firstly say, Merle, She's a goddess, by the way. I know her deeply personally and has been an ex-colleague of mine. So, Mel, welcome to our table. So can I maybe hand over to whoever feels like, this is something close to your heart. This is, and I know it's for all of you, but how are we actually looking at our employees and creating an environment where they can contribute to their best ability during this time of change? Nangula, I think you mentioned your team, and you specifically mentioned that their well-being is very much, at the center of your important things to do.
So very practically, okay, so there are lots of initiatives that we've put in place from a sort of centralized HR perspective. Awesome stuff. Don't know if it was Providence, but we hired a head of wellness. I think she started in Feb last year.
Wow.
And wow, her name's Marlene. She's amazing.
Shout out.
Visionary, and she's just brought so much fresh thinking and commitment and passion and drive. So there've been initiatives since last year, and this year is just sort of also, she just keeps raising the bar. So we've got a lot of things around. We ran series on, I think it was an 8-week series on mental wellness. We had lots of sort of self-development initiatives and programs. Right now, there's a wellness challenge, and it's supported with nutritionists and exercise and mental health professionals. So whole person wellness is lots of that stuff. But for my area that I'm sort of directly responsible for, I've got about 380 people in my total universe, plus a few additional. We started doing, first of all, daily, we called it a war room. It wasn't a war room. It's multidisciplinary, cross-functional. We bust silos in April last year. And every day, 9 o'clock, we were checking in. And some days it was our 160 lines in a spreadsheet. And some days it was just, where's everyone at? It's a safe space. Let's just have a conversation. And then sort of wide staff engagement. So every 3 to 4 weeks, I do a water cooler engagement. It's on Teams. There's different subjects and topics. I've invited sort of crowdsourced from the guys. What do you want to have conversations? Sometimes it's podcast style. Sometimes it's just us and them. And then they build on one another's points. It's awesome. And then specifically with my team, we've just finished a 6-module team coaching process with an excellent facilitator who's based in SA. And the whole idea was, what we needed then was just that my team is incredibly high performing. They're really, really sharp individuals. First time in my life, I handpicked every single one of them. And I really wanted to give them a safe space to just be like, I don't need my game face. If I'm emotional today, I am. But also learn some skills and tools to just navigate that really scary, uncertain time. We're going to do another 6 modules now, but we're going to be looking more for what are the skills for the marathon. And then we're going to take that down. We're also building it for our next level of management, because we want to cascade some consistency, the mental models around how we show up, how we equip ourselves to actually be okay in the long run.
Wow, very practical initiatives. And I think the idea is putting your money where your mouth is, not only saying I care, but showing you care. Marlene, and then I'm going to ask Melvi.
Anne-marie, we kept our structures going in like we've been at work all the time. But I think one of the things that I would like to say is that without money, we got a sponsorship for Careways, where we looked at the extended families that was also in the house with people. So it was not just for our employees, because the mental health, the suicidal, and also the people died of COVID in the household. So that had huge effects. So we looked at the family members, even if it was your sister's child that was in the house. So that was one of the tools which was very effective, and we're still using it, and we can track it, and people could anonymously phone in. We could just see the services that they have used. And that was our gift during this time to our employees. Thank you.
That is beautiful. So it extended beyond the direct circle. Melvi, talk to us.
Yeah, so I think my perspective will be slightly different again as an entrepreneurial space. But I'd say that, don't underestimate the value of your existing network. And this could be speaking to entrepreneurs, talking and supporting other entrepreneurs, but then also, you know, as a working individual, your friends are also working individuals. They're also experiencing, you know, probably a lot of the challenges you are. So I don't think that most, caring or normal individuals out there will say, you know what, I'm like having some work challenges, or I'm struggling to deal with this. Would you mind talking to me? And it's interesting because I've had quite a few people reaching out to me, speaking to me, like, you know, saying, well, you look like you've got it all figured out. I'm like, quite the contrary, but we can chat about my journey. So I think, you know, even outside the workspace, don't underestimate that, you know, your friends and acquaintances and your networks might be more willing to chat than you realize. And, you know, if you don't ask, it's always a no. So the worst that can happen is you can ask and you can get a no. So, you know, and I think that also doesn't cost you anything. And I've made some amazing connections that way. So, yeah.
Oh my goodness. It almost speaks to a culture of helpfulness. That is so beautiful. Thank you. Gary, any other pertinent patterns of questions popping up?
There haven't been that many questions, but Sandile, you've got a question. Sandile from Woolworths Financial Services. Would you like to ask it?
Sandile is in the house, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the talk. Such insightful, quite a lot of points that are made here. Just a question, Marlene, you spoke a lot about activism and holding government accountable. I mean, organizationally, how do we perhaps hold organizations accountable on the redress of the forever growing unemployment issue, especially for youth and people with disabilities? I'm saying this, I just have to put it out there, that we have just started a program in WFS where we employed youth, particularly people with disabilities. We put them on a program of leadership, and some of them have been also appointed permanently in the roles in the organization. But how do we hold organizations or corporate also to commit and vigorously to address those issues?
Wow,
thank
beautiful.
You so much. Thank you so much. You made my day. Because you are doing something. You have actively, as a company, say, I am going to employ young people and persons with disabilities. That's the first step, which is positive. Secondly, how do we keep ourselves accountable? It is about leadership. It is about leadership that must make that decision and then implement it. Because you can't just have it on paper to look glossy and to say we're going to do it. At this particular stage, Sandile, it's about where you are to make the change. Because the impression that you must leave is an impression of change, but is actively changed. Because one of the companies that I would like to highlight, it is Woolworths. They are employing because of not just deaf persons that is deaf, also physical disabilities. We are employing, and none of us get incentive for that, because we have a social awareness and we believe in, and it's not just about an internship, it's about a real job. And how do we keep ourselves accountable? It is not just about a scorecard. It is about our commitment to our continent. Because if we are going to be a tick box, we are going to be a country that's only going to look at transformation about race, about the color of our skin, and not to look at how do we bring the people together and how going to move towards building a country. And at this particular stage, the people that needs us more, it's young people and persons with disabilities. So our accountability, Sandile, starts with us as a leader to implement it, to force it. Sometimes, sorry to say it, Anne-marie, you need to be able, in some instances, not to be political correct.
To be intentional.
You need intentionally, and you need to say, we're going to do it. Not just looking at the obstacles. How are they going to get to work? Are they what type of disability? No, man, leave it. You will carry that person with disability up with 2 flights. They will be there 6 o'clock in the morning already just to have a job. So I want to say to you, bringing in the persons that's normally not been seen making an active difference, they are going to change your company. Thank you, Sandile.
Love it. So it's about, for me, the diversity in demographics are the most uninteresting diversity out there. So those are the superficial stuff. So you really, really raised the bar. Thank you, Sandile. Kerry, anything else from us?
No, nothing else. Nothing else we've got.
I'm seeing a few people leave, so maybe we should wrap up. And I think from my side, just the last comment. I firstly want to say thank you to my dearest friends around this table. What a wonderful conversation to have on a Thursday. By the way, tomorrow is Friday, so 2 wins back to back. And for me, what stood out for completely this morning is that, for me, leadership is about creating environments where our people can do their most courageous thinking together. We need it. We need it now more than ever. And if we ever needed change, and if we ever needed that kind of leadership, it's when we are looking about the decisions we make in this box. These decisions matter. Every single one of them matters. So let's make it count. Kerry, I want to maybe hand over to you to close us out for today. And thank you, everybody. Phenomenal.
Thanks, everyone. So I just, there've been, if you can just have a look at the chat box, there's so many wonderful comments. I'll just read out Josephine's, if you don't mind. Amazing to be part of this. Thank you for everything you've shared. It really is insightful and full of reality, love, soul, care, and kindness. It's real. Thank you. Love and light from Mauritius. So, there's so many lovely comments, but for me, that really sort of, it latches onto what we're trying to achieve here. And that is about, leadership is real. It's warts and all. And so, I think we wanted everyone to be on the session to come away feeling encouraged, to feel that they're not alone. If we can, if you can lie in bed at night, tonight or tomorrow or next week, and suddenly, there's a spark of inspiration, and you realize that something that came from this webinar can help you and your team, your business, your way forward, your future. That is really what we're trying to do here. And so, I really want to say thank you so much to each of you ladies. What an inspiration. What a pleasure it has been for me to spend time with you. And thank you to everyone else who's joined us. I would like to just chat a bit about our next session as part of the Conscious Leadership Series, which is on the 23rd of June. And Laura, would you mind bringing up the slide?
Thank you, Melvi. Thank you, Nangula. Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Thank you, Marlene. Thank you, Melvi. Everybody, nice having all of you. Thank you.
And those in the background managing.
So everybody, the next session is on the 23rd of June. It is with Dr. Priya Daya. So the topic is the transformation pressure cooker. So it speaks to tough regulations with hefty penalties, what conscious leaders do when the pressure is mounting. This speaks to transformation across the board, gender, race, everything, disability, exactly. Sexual orientation, and it speaks to the absolute intention that businesses need to take in making this a reality across Africa, across the world. So, please join us for this session. We're hoping that it's going to be, this is a tough one to follow, I won't lie. But yeah, I hope to see you there, and thank you once again to all of you for joining us.
Thank you.
Have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Have a good day, Sandile. You made my day. With disability. Yay!